All right, dude. So welcome, Ed. I guess I kind of just know you as your Instagram handle, like ed.med.
Yeah,
Um,
that's what usually happens. Yeah,
but so you're Ed. I don't even know your last name.
Ed Ing, spelled NG, just
Okay,
NG.
okay. And you're also a third year osteopathic medical student like me.
Yep.
You go to Western U down in Pomoa, right?
Yeah, Pomona,
Um,
California.
that was actually my first interview, and I really, really liked it. I was kind of bummed I didn't get in, but hey, the chips fall where they fall. I'm happy where I am now. But so how
You're
are you
you're
liking
you're
it?
in.
Yeah,
It's good. It's good. You know what? Like third year, I always tell people third year is like you do the same amount of studying you do second year, but now you add a full-time job on top of it. But the studying makes sense.
yeah,
So third year, honestly, I think is miles and miles better than second year,
yeah.
especially from a mental health standpoint.
I would definitely agree with that. I really hated first and second year of medical school. I don't really know what type of student you are, but I significantly struggled. It was in the bottom part of my class. I almost failed out a couple classes, and it sucked. And I was always stressed and just under, not sleeping well. But then
Hmm.
third year has been, like you said, kind of this breath of fresh air. It's like a full-time job, kind of. Yeah, I've definitely found it challenging trying to study at night, after
Yeah.
working 8 hours. So I actually think I've been studying less and I need to ramp up. But, all in all, overall, I've had such a better experience third year.
Right.
But
Right.
how I was thinking of how I would like to structure this podcast is, I know you're really involved with like student council, and so you do have like influence on everyone as a whole. So I kind of want to hear about like your own experiences with mental health, maybe even prior to medical school, but specifically in medical school. But then also like how, you know, osteopathic medical schools and the student government are trying to help address this issue on a whole. Like I saw one post you made a
Right.
couple days ago that it was kind of like an inspirational post, but it was like, you kind of struggled in high school. You talked about how you were a first generation undergraduate,
Hmm.
graduate.
Hmm.
You got your undergraduate degree, and then like you never thought you would end up in medical school. So you clearly
Yeah.
had challenges even prior to getting here. So, like, I guess what were your mental health challenges prior to even getting to medical school?
Um, I've never been. I don't think I've ever officially been diagnosed with GAD, but
Okay.
I can see some GAD tendencies in me.
Well,
You
remember
know.
the listeners don't know our med school's acronym.
Oh,
So what is
sorry.
GAD?
Generalized anxiety disorder.
Yeah.
Uh, and for like for those who aren't in medicine, like generalized anxiety disorder is constant worry, and there's a set of guidelines that you have to follow for at least a certain amount of time for it to be considered generalized anxiety disorder. But I think everybody experiences what they call anxiety. I think it's kind of everyone has those feelings from time to time. It just depends on the level of debilitation or not. So when I was 10, my dad got really sick. He had an aneurysm in his brain. He went through multiple neurosurgeries, and he was basically not who he was. He almost died, and he somehow managed to pull out of that.
Hmm.
So because of that, I'm the oldest child. I'm the
Hmm.
only son. I felt an obligation to step up and help out. So during junior high and high school, education was my priority. For me, it was just go to school because I have to, play sports because I need to,
Hmm.
and then go help family. They kept putting me in honors classes and AP classes, and I was like, stop it. I'm not
Yeah.
doing well. It just makes me look bad, but you know, uh, they kept putting me in those classes, and I, you know, had to deal with that stuff. And at one point, I didn't think I was going to graduate high school. Uh, so obviously, that's a lot of anxiety because you're like, well, what can you? When you're a kid, you don't know much.
Hmm.
I don't know much now, but as a kid, you don't know what your options are. And so that's pretty. That reduces a lot of anxiety, because you don't know whether or not you're going to graduate, what your future holds. Um, Obviously, I managed to graduate high school, um, and I decided to go to community college first. And from community college, that's a whole nother level of stress because there's a stigma that if you go to community college, you're not a real college student, or you're
Yeah.
not smart enough, or that you weren't good enough to get into a school right away, or what have you. Um, and so that's a lot of pressure on a student too. And it wasn't until I got into community college where I realized that, hey, I need to make a decision about what I want to do. And ever since my dad got sick, I was like, you know what, medicine sounds cool, but every kid at some point says they want to be a doctor.
Yeah.
I feel like uh, not many end up doing it. So I was like, you know what, I'll do it. I'll choose medicine as if I had a choice. But I did that, and I was dean's list every single semester at community college, and I applied to only one school to transfer to. I only applied to one school,
Mm-hmm.
and I applied to USC, University of Southern California, which is a
Oh,
top
okay.
25 school. It's one of the best academic centers in the nation. Didn't think I had a chance to get in. It was a pipe dream,
Mm-hmm.
I figured I'll put all my eggs in this one basket and
Just
hope
see
to
what
God
happens.
that they take
Yeah.
me. Yeah, and that's also another level of like stress. So this entire time, from my childhood up until even now, but up until that point, I was incredibly stressed because I had no clue whether or not I would, make it. So there was that, and then God, let's not even let's not even talk about the whole med school application process because you've been through it too, and that's like
Mm-hmm.
a huge stressor.
Yeah. Well,
So
so I guess my question is, you obviously have had stress after stress after stress. So what kind of things, how did you learn to manage your own stress? Because you always were trying to put yourself under so much pressure, trying to
yeah,
chase the med school dream.
um, you know what? That's actually a really difficult question to answer, surprisingly, because for a long time I didn't know how to deal with the stress. Uh, uh, my mentality was you just got to keep going. Or
Mm-hmm.
some days I would just shut down. Some days I would just have days where I would wake up and be like, you know what? I don't want to do anything. I can't. I physically and mentally cannot do anything, and I would just lay in bed all day. So you start to see, you know, signs and symptoms of like a little bit of depression creeping in.
Mm-hmm.
I was losing interest. I was, all this. And actually, when I was in junior high, I had severe depression. I had a suicide uh, attempt, or not
Okay.
attempt, ideation.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I realize now, looking back, that the way I handled stress was sometimes I would go to the gym, sometimes I'd play video games, sometimes I would just take time to be with myself. And surprisingly, that is very therapeutic.
Mm-hmm.
And that's mainly what I did for that pre-med period, which was I kind of leaned in on myself.
Yeah.
Um, and I didn't realize it, but that's how I did it.
And so did you, when you were 12 or whatever, when you're talking about, you had thoughts of hurting yourself or whatever happened, did you end up seeking traditional medical care at that point, or did you kind of just figure it out on your own on a different way?
Right, right. And I'm assuming you mean like therapy, right?
Or just going to see a primary care doctor and tell him what happened,
Right.
medication, I don't know.
For me, I did not. That was a really dark time in my life where I thought to myself, you know what? My dad's sick. We're dirt poor right now.
Yeah.
Uh, why does my mom need to worry about feeding an extra mouth? And
Hmm.
it's a really like,
Fucked up thought.
it is. And, but you're 12
Hmm.
and you don't know what the hell you're talking about, but that's the thought you have. And you think you're being a martyr, not realizing, whatever. But what happened was I climbed onto my roof and I wanted to jump off of it. But at the last second, I called someone who's still my best friend, and he talked me out of it. And from that moment on, I kind of just leaned in on him.
Yeah.
Um, and so, but it's 12-year-olds giving 12-year-olds advice. But
Hey, but
Uh,
I mean, either way, it must have worked. You didn't
it
fucking
worked.
jump, you know?
Yeah, yeah. So I kind of never went the traditional route of seeing a therapist and getting medical attention, but I started to use humor
Hmm.
as a way to deal with and to cope with my mental health. Uh, and so I kind of like just started, yeah. So humor kind of was my medicine, and so I've never really officially gotten medical treatment for that,
Okay.
but
Yeah.
it's in the past now, and it's like I don't have any thoughts of
Yeah.
any, and
And it
so
sounds
it's
like
it
you
worked.
learned from it. And you
Yeah,
kind of said like you leaned into, you almost a meditative state. You go into the gym, playing video games, kind of like your alone time. But you
yeah,
clearly had that social component as well. You at least had that friend to call. And that's always what I talk about so much. I feel like with mental health, it's like it's so much more complicated than just going to see a therapist and going maybe and taking meds. If you don't have that social component in your life, it's really hard to be happy. So I guess if we could fast forward, I look at your presence on social media as one like I really like and respect because I think there's a lot of medical professionals or students, I guess we're not really professionals yet, who like glamorize this lifestyle. They're posing in figs and like seems like they're just trying to put out their like use this discount code, and it
yeah.
drives me insane. I can't stand it, and I like that you're not like that. I feel like you a lot of people look up to you online. I think you really have a great image and it's a proper image. So let's talk about kind of like the mental health experience of pre-med and most specifically I guess applying to medical school because I think a lot of your listeners and hopefully they tune into this conversation are pre-med, right? So like what I remember my worst year of pre-med was definitely when I was applying, and
Mm-hmm.
I thought one of my biggest stressors actually was financial because
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really realize how much money it costs to apply to medical school.
Yeah.
Like I just didn't do that calculation in my head, and I remember sitting there. I was living in Sacramento at the time, and I like max out credit cards, paying for all those secondary applications. And when I was factoring in like, okay, I'll have to fly this place, and it's going to cost this much, and get a hotel and all this. So I actually moved in with my parents during that interview year or pre med application year, whatever. I moved in with my girlfriend at the time with my parents. It was just very, very, very challenging. And I was, of course, super stressed. Like, what was your application year like?
I applied twice.
Hmm.
Didn't get in the first time because I didn't realize that secondary apps have a time limit.
Right.
No one
Yeah.
told me this because my pre-med advisors were garbage.
Hmm.
But I was like, I have time to submit these secondary apps,
The
not
deadline
realizing,
isn't until April. I'll be all good.
yeah, not realizing it's like, oh, you mean I was supposed to submit it like 2 days after I got it?
Yeah.
Oh, well, shit. Uh, so then I applied. Then I went to get my master's, and I reapplied. And so the stressful part about applying to med school is not knowing where you'll be next year.
Mm.
Because when you decide to go to med school and you decide to apply for med school, right? You have two options: either you get into med school or you don't. If you get into med school, cool. It's not made in the shade, but you're in med school now. You don't have to worry about getting into med school. You're already in. But if you don't get in, you have a whole academic year to sit and watch your friends get in
Mm.
and watch, because that was my biggest issue because I have classmates and friends who got into med school before I did,
Hmm.
and it was a struggle
Mm.
because here I am. I'm like, you know
Kind
what?
of
These
like
guys are
FOMA or whatever, like fear of missing
FOMO,
out.
fear of
Yeah.
missing out, and
Yeah.
I think that's it because I would see my friends and my classmates who are the same age as me, some younger,
Yeah.
in med school, and I'm like, gosh, what do I do for another year?
Yeah.
You know, do I work? How am I supposed to strengthen my application?
Well,
I had
and
no
it's like
guidance.
at that level, you technically had a master's degree, but I don't know exactly what you were doing for work, but I know most of us pre-med students weren't making a ton of money. I was
No,
working as
no.
like very low level job. I was working a job that only really needed a high school education kind of thing at that time. I imagine it was the same for you.
Yeah, I just did scribing
Yeah.
in the emergency department, and they paid minimum wage, you know.
Yeah.
But I obviously stopped. I had to stop that for my master's degree because there was no like way for me to do it. But and for me, that's the most challenging part is kind of like realizing that if I don't get in, I gotta deal with this for another year,
Mhm.
another year of being a pre med. Because being a pre med is, I think, noble, but no one wants to stay a pre med.
Mhm.
You know, out of like it's like pre med is the stepping stone, right? Because you're just like I don't want to, but I didn't want to deal with another year of not being in med school. And no disrespect to my IMG friends, I almost considered going to the Caribbean
Mhm.
because I was that impatient. And for me, that was a big challenge was to learn to deal with patience and deal with like the fact that your time will come when it comes.
Yeah.
Kind of just like you said, let the chips fall where they may. So for me, that was the big stress part. Financially, it was stressful too. Um, but luckily, I had a little bit saved up,
Yeah.
and I didn't. And my second time around, I didn't really apply the same way. I applied much more concentrated
Yeah.
application process, so that worked out for me that way. But
Yeah.
for me, it was just dealing with the fact that I didn't want to be a pre med anymore.
Well, I remember that application year. The worst part for me was especially like, after I sent out all my secondaries and stuff, was
Yeah.
checking my email. I must have checked my email 150 times a day. Like
Oh
it
man.
was so unhealthy. And for me, it got to the point where I literally would have to put my phone down and put it in airplane mode for a couple hours because it was just getting too much. And it was all I was thinking about. It got to the point where I remember speaking with my therapist about it. I would have to meditate a lot, yeah, a lot more than usual because I just had to like stay focused in the moment. Like, I've done everything in my control, and now it's just in the control of that emissions committee. And I
Yeah.
just have to let the chips fall as they're going to fall. And, it was extremely taxing. But whenever I talk to pre med students, that's kind of what I say. Like, do whatever you can, but know that at the end of the day, it's kind of just a crapshoot. You might get in this year, you might get in 2 years from now, and it's not anything that you necessarily did wrong. It's just I
Yeah.
feel very fortunate to actually gain an acceptance to medical school because
Yeah.
most people don't get in. It's I
No.
yeah.
Most people don't even get to the process of application. Like everyone, like a lot of pre meds will start off college as pre meds, but they won't even make it through to the application. Like they'll get stumped by a class, or they'll get stumped by the MCAT, and they'll get stumped by the applications process. And there's nothing wrong with not fulfilling the pre med thought, but I think a lot of people don't, like you said, a lot of people don't even make it to that point. And checking your email 150 times a day is super stressful because every time you get an email, you kind of tense up a little. You're like,
Yeah.
oh shit, and then you can always tell, by the way the first sentence goes, whether they want you or they don't.
Oh
You know,
yeah, yeah. Thank you for applying, but like Well, all right. So we've talked about this for a little bit now. So you get into med school, you're starting, you move to SoCal. I remember that school being very cool. Like there was there's like a dental school, a physical therapy school right
yeah,
there.
yeah,
SoCal with all, it's a cool place to live. I would have been happy if I got in there. But so you get in, was it smooth sailing right when you got like started classes, or like what did that look like? Were you like how were you struggling? Were you struggling?
yeah. So I actually did my master's at my med school.
Oh, okay, cool.
So I live my hometown is 15 minutes away from my med school,
Okay,
so it wasn't really a move, but it was a transition.
yeah.
Being in that master's program helped a lot because I was kind of exposed to
What
higher
med
level of
school is
work.
like? Yeah,
Because I was a pretty shitty student at USC. A lot of
yeah,
cramming overnight, going straight
yeah.
into the test, all nighters. In med school, I've only pulled one all nighter my entire life in med school, and it was
Hmm.
miserable. But transitioning wise, it was tough. Like we started off with anatomy, and for anatomy, I did okay in that one. I did pretty well in that one. But like I think moving on to like our molecular bio and genetics
Hmm.
course, that was hard. That was really hard for me. And I think for me, it was just figuring out a way to study.
Hmm.
And that was the most stressful part because I think for some people find that one magic method for them and they just use it through the whole first two preclinical years. Some people might find it challenging to stay the same course from course to course. But for me, sometimes I would change study habits from test to test.
Yeah.
And that's stressful because you kind of like on top of trying to study, you also start to feel like, why can't I figure it out?
Yeah.
Why can't I come up with a system because everyone else is doing fine? And that's the thing, your brain will play tricks on you, and it'll tell you everyone is doing fine and doing well. How come you can't
Yeah.
do it? So for me, the biggest difficulties for the first 2 years were like a lot of self doubt. Even if I was doing okay in class or on quizzes or on tests, there's a lot of self doubt about why can't you this, why can't you that.
Yeah.
And so for me, that was one of the biggest challenges um, of first and second year. To be honest with you,
Well, so I kind of want to then break up this next answer. I guess like, before you started really studying for board, so maybe like the first year and a half of medical school ish,
yeah,
the step one at least. Um,
right.
what obviously, I think all of us can relate to the concept of like imposter syndrome, like having doubts. We're not smart enough to be there, and maybe not confident in our abilities to study. I certainly felt that way. But
Hmm.
what techniques did you start to develop, or maybe what techniques you already had in place? Like, I see videos of you like doing workouts and stuff. I know that's a component. And so like that, and like, what else do you like to do? Like, how do you de-stress and handle all this?
Uh, to be quite honest with you, working out is a big component. 30 has been a little more challenging to work out all the time because you work odd hours. Sometimes you get home, like you said, you're just exhausted. So fitness was always a big thing for me. Um, Funny enough, during dedicated, I picked up card magic,
Oh,
and
okay.
it's such a random thing, but like playing cards and collecting playing cards to the point where I literally have, that's my collection right there. But
Oh, okay.
that,
Let's go.
so I do that as a kind of a distressor, and it's kind of nice. But kind of the underlying theme for that is just find something that you enjoy
Yeah.
and not letting go of that. I think there's an attending that told me that you should schedule your fun and then schedule your work around your fun instead of scheduling your fun around your work.
Yeah.
So and I kind of put it in a different mindset for me where it's like, all right, well, sometimes I'm like, all right, I have to be at the gym at this time.
Hmm.
Therefore, in order for me to make that, I need to work from this time to this time.
Yeah.
Instead of saying I need to work from this time to this time, and then maybe I'll get to the gym at this time. If you prioritize your fun and if you prioritize your hobbies, then it'll work better. And so for me, that's how I would deal with it during the third year.
Yeah. Well, one thing, I think that is so important in all of medical school, but, especially those first years, because I feel like it's so easy to go, you wake up early and just study all freaking day. It's like
Yeah,
you got to have a balance and you got to have a portion of your day that's just totally non-medical school related. And
yeah,
I feel like that was actually one thing I did pretty well in medical school sometimes. I
right.
would play sports with my friends. And then the big thing for me is once I got to dedicated, I joined a golf course. And
Oh,
so what I would do is once a week I played golf and I would take like a practice exam, and after I would take the practice exam I'd go play around, and it would just be something I'd always look forward to so much. And so that was
yeah.
my like playing with cards or whatever it's you got to have like that something.
And
And
it's like that light at the end of the tunnel,
yeah,
where like you're yeah
and because I had some colleagues, I'm sure you did too, that just went so balls to the wall. Granted, I bet they probably scored better than me, but they killed themselves doing it, and they didn't look happy, and it just was awful to watch.
yeah. And I think that's the biggest thing is like some people uh they obsess about this 3-digit score. They
Well, I guess
obsess.
I guess while we're on this is a good segue. I
Ah,
heard you talking about this on your story the other day. So I guess
yeah.
what we're laughing about, listeners, is so how to best explain this. So okay, the USMLE is like the licensing exam that almost all medical students take. We're DO students, osteopathic students, so we technically don't have to take it, but it seems like we have to take it. Most, I don't know,
Yeah.
75% of DO students take it. Doesn't really matter. But yeah, this score is so important to what sort of residency you want to get into. If you want to go be a neurosurgeon, you better do extremely well on this test, kind of thing. So the biggest news that is recently that came out is the step one score, the one that's supposed to be extremely anxiety provoking, stress inducing, is now becoming pass fail, which on extremely high levels, like I feel like the higher ups are like, oh, this is a good thing. It's going to make the students less stressed. But I disagree. I don't. I think it's just going to put stress in other places.
I'll tell you what I think about that. I have a lot of thoughts about that. I'm not as well versed in the subject as some of my other friends, but from personal experience, if so, another background context for your listeners is they made step one pass fail, but they kept step two a 3-digit score. And what step two is, it's the second set of boards that you take after your third clinical year. Um, and so the way I see it happening is that now program directors for residency are going to start using step two
Yeah.
as the factor. People are going to have, instead of 2 years of stress and then taking your step one, now students are going to have 3 years of stress because they're so worried about,
Yeah. The
you
step two
know,
score.
step two score. I see students starting to disregard preclinical stuff much earlier, trying to get the clinical stuff in earlier. I see schools transitioning to an earlier clinical um, curriculum, and I feel like it's just going to cause stress in other places. If they truly wanted to de-stress students, they would have made everything pass fail. You
Hmm.
know, uh, but then again, if you make everything pass fails, schools might start doing grades, and this is a whole. There's a lot of moving parts to this, I guess, plan.
Yeah.
And I think that students are stressing. They're always going to stress.
Yeah.
But this is going to add more stress because now you don't know what's going to happen. Uh, so I think you're right. It's going to add stress in other places. And I think we have to wait and see how that's really going to play out because we don't know yet.
Well, and I get, me and you both go to osteopathic schools that are kind of looked at as like, the adopted child. And, I'm saying
Hmm.
that obviously with a slang expression. It's like, compared to MD students, we're always looked at like second class citizens in a
Yeah.
sense. Not always, but this is a, generalization. And so that's why I really liked the USMLE. I thought it was a more fair exam than what we took or have to take, the COMLEX, the osteopathic version of it. I thought it was better structured. I like studying for that one better. And now I feel bad for the people younger than me because I think osteopathic students are going to be at even more at a disadvantage because now the name recognition of where you actually go to medical school might matter more. And I
Right.
don't think that's causing and it's going to help anybody. That it's we have such a shortage of doctors. Hopefully more medical schools are going to continue to pop up and it doesn't make sense. And the it's I don't know how what your grading system is like at Western U, but it's not the same as PNWU. So I don't think
No.
it's fair to compare your grades versus my grades at
Mm.
school. And it's just, but the USMLE scores, we can at least compare those. And it's I don't know. It makes me really frustrated. And I don't think that it's going to make it any easier. And I don't think that having a graded test is necessarily a bad thing. Like we had to take the MCAT to get here. We have to take step two, like you said, and I get it's stressful, but I don't know. It's like you said, I guess we'll just have to kind of wait and see. But I'm glad I guess we're graduating when we're going to graduate.
I think you and I are at a very lucky time in medical education. There are changes that we get to experience, but there are other changes we don't, and we get to kind of navigate. that, and it's a good enough time, I think. But speaking to what you said about DOs and taking a step one, I agree with you. My thought process for step one was I'm going to study my ass off for that test, and I'm going to get the best score I can so that you, not you, but other people who are naysayers, will never have a doubt whether or not my degree has anything to do with my ability to be a good physician,
Yeah.
right? Because they call step one the great equalizer, right? And that's true. Because it doesn't matter how smart you are, what school you went to, it's about how hard you can work. And if your score shows that, there's nothing you can argue about. A DO student with a 260 and versus an MD student with a 210, you're going to tell me that the MD student is better because they're at an MD school?
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't make sense to me. You take the same test, you have almost the same curriculum minus the OMT, and this person scored higher. So my thought process was, I'm going to go at this test as hard as I possibly can, and whatever score I get, if it's good, then that should kind of calm some doubts. On the flip side, though, step one is a terrible indicator of what type of physician you'll be.
Yeah, you can definitely, yeah.
I've never been in my life asked about a certain
Method of
chromosome.
action, yeah.
Method of, yeah, none of that. So the flip side of that coin is DO students still have step two.
Mm-hmm.
And if step two is going to be used now as the new step one, if you do really well in step two, I think that's even better than doing really well in step one, because it's clinical knowledge, clinical acumen, and clinical application.
Yeah.
If you can show that you have a really good score in step two, it shows that you know how to think like a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
It shows that you know what to do as a next step in treatment, which I think is much better than step one.
That's true. I would definitely agree with that. But I would also, I don't know exactly how your schedule is set up, but, for my step one, I took like 4 weeks-ish of dedicated time, which was actually a lot less than some of our MD colleagues. I don't know how much you took. And I'm taking, I think, 3 weeks of dedicated for step two. And listeners, what I mean by dedicated is during that time, I don't do anything besides study for the test. It's not fun. It's not something I'm looking forward to, but it's how I best prepare and feel confident walking into that exam. And I think step two, the just studying for it, while it may be, I think, maybe easier in a sense that we don't have to memorize as much stupid, pointless bullshit, but working 40 hours a week, and like I have to commute about half an hour, to and from every day. So call it 55 hours. I'd like to go to working out. I'm finding it a lot harder to study, and I'm not putting in nearly as many hours as I was when I was a preclinical student.
Mm-hmm. That's true. That's true. I think it also depends on the rotation you're on. It depends on what you're capable of that day. Like for surgery, oh man.
Oh, never. Yeah.
4 a.m. wake up call, get home at 5 or 6, got to be in bed by 8 or 9.
Yeah.
It was hard to study.
What specialty are you pursuing anyway?
I'm pretty torn between emergency medicine and general surgery.
Oh, okay.
I hated my surgery rotation, but I love surgery, if that makes any sense. But for me right now, emergency medicine is just slightly above surgery. I like trauma, so something trauma related.
Okay, interesting. Well, psychiatry all the way. And I've been the only reason I went to medical school because I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Right. So from the very beginning, I've always loved psych. I did really enjoy my neuro rotation. So maybe for a day I considered doing a neuro psych dual board, and then I was like, nah, fuck that. And I'm not gonna do that. But I even though I actually never anticipated, but I actually really, really enjoyed my family med rotation. Yeah. Just because I felt like half of what I was doing in family med was psych stuff. And so that was really, really cool. But I found during those rotations, I would get super excited for the psych cases. And then when we were just discussing the, run of the mill diabetes, I enjoyed it. I thought it was kind of an interesting challenge, but I wouldn't get as amped up about it. But,
Yeah.
So I guess now what I kind of want to ask you, I've been, you know, we've hit it off. Hopefully you feel like you know me, but since the start of medical school, I'm kind of like I'm a very loud person.
Mm.
So everyone all knew from the very beginning I was bipolar, and my classmates were actually a big motivator on why I started this podcast. And because
Right.
I met a lot of other people with mental illness and other challenges, and so I felt the stigma surrounding mental illness was actually very small at my school. It's of course not zero, but I was very, very pleased how our school handled it, and tried to support us. It's not, of course, perfect. I'm sure some of my classmates would disagree with me, but I've been impressed. What about your school? What do you think the kind of environment is like?
I think my school does a pretty good job of it. I think because we're at a health professions campus, mental health is looked upon differently because there are individuals who maybe like if you're a dental student or a PA student, not PA student, if you're a dental student or like a PT student, you might not directly deal with psychiatry as a subject, right? But you kind of have an appreciation for what mental health is. And so I think our school does a pretty good job of that. We have counselors available. We just recently started oh my God, it's gonna kill me. It's like a peer. My friend's gonna kill me because she's the one that like,
Like a
uh,
peer-to-peer support text
kind of,
line?
kind of. Um, I'm gonna remember at some point. I'll get back to it. But it's like kind of like how to recognize when someone is feeling suicidal
Okay.
or depressed. I forget what it's called, but it's like you have to get trained by it. Um, but there's that, and our school has actually done a really good job of taking care of people with mental health issues.
Hmm.
Uh, our office of student affairs and academic affairs are really understanding. Uh, um, we've had students take a whole year off because of their mental health. So I think our school, at least my school, Western U, does a pretty good job of dealing with students and their mental health issues.
Hmm.
It's not perfect, like you said, but
Yeah.
overall, I have not gotten the set that is. I haven't felt like I couldn't go to anybody at our school for help.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And then it's just, I know you know this, but for the listeners, I say it all the time, but I'll say it again. Doctors and medical students were more likely to be depressed, more likely to become have substance abuse issues, and more likely to kill ourselves. And it's a sad reality, but that's just how it is. And it just sucks. And so I know, are involved with like student government, the
hmm,
osteopathic student government. I kind of wish I was also involved, but I've now learned like I have enough on my plate. I just can't do it. I'm barely
yeah.
keeping this podcast afloat, I feel like, but I don't want to give up. So what now on like even a higher level, like an osteopathic student government? I know you get to probably meet with maybe heads of the American Osteopathic Association. What steps do you see them making now? What steps do you think that they should make in the future to help improve this issue?
Oh,
Yeah, long tough question. I know. Yeah.
it's a lot. It's a lot. So one of my closest friends, she's from University of Incarnate Word School of Medicine, osteopathic medicine. But she is actually the like chairperson of our mental health task force. And for the listeners out there, I am part of COSGP, and what that stands for is Council of Osteopathic Student Government Presidents. In the osteopathic medical student world, there are two big advocacy and leadership groups. One's called SOMA, um, and the other one is COSGP, which I'm part of. And we are a direct arm of ACOM, which is the American Association of Colleges of Osteopathic Medicine. Basically, they oversee all the schools. And what my organization is the student government president and vice president of every single college of osteopathic medicine meet quarterly to discuss issues pertaining to osteopathic medicine and to the osteopathic medical student. As you can imagine, one of those issues is mental health. And so we have a mental health committee. We call it the wellness committee. And so what they do is they kind of they they deal with all matters of mental health. And if you follow our Instagram, you'll see that we're doing the OMS Week of Wellness coming up.
Okay.
Where it's an entire week of wellness. And for more information about that, you can just go to COSGP on my Instagram, on our Instagram page to see that. But we also deal with mental health toolkits. So my friend, her committee is has come up with a mental health toolkit, and these toolkits are going to be sent out to all the comms for them to use, and so it's stuff like that. And it starts from the ground up, which is we as students know what's best for ourselves, and so we used our experiences as students and the students that we represent to kind of mold our mental health initiatives, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of like the higher ups, right, and what they can do for us, it's really difficult. And I'm not saying this because the organization doesn't want us to have mental health. I think it's hard because in situations like this with the kind of a bureaucratic structure, if you want something done, you have to be very succinct in what you want. Mm-hmm. And I think a big challenge is there with organizations like that, there's a lot of turnover. So things get started and they might not get done because they have more pressing matters to deal with, right? Like, the complex going down to 350 questions or something like that instead of 400. Mm-hmm. That's like, for them, that's paramount. Mental health sometimes is on the back burner because they rely on the schools to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
So in that aspect, it is a little challenging. But I think our organization and especially the people on our wellness committee have done a good job of voicing our concerns. And for the most part, it's been received very well. So they hear us. They do hear us. It's just a matter of action.
Mm-hmm.
And that's never going to stop. That's never going to be a process where we're like, all right, well, mental health is solved. We're done. It's going to take consistent conversations with students and, the higher ups. But it's something that we've been doing, and it's something that's been passed down from council to council, and it's something that we continue to work on. And we try to improve every year that there's a new board or there's a new council. So that's kind of where we're at right now.
Well, I was writing down, I really like what you were talking about, like a mental well box. Well box, is that what you called it? Well box?
Toolkit.
Toolkit. It's not cookie cutter. It's not everyone has kind of the same thing, because it just made me think, like, so this past summer when I finished step 1 and passed that stupid piece of crap, my thing, when I got diagnosed, I was really depressed for a few years. I was working in the insurance industry and I hated it. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to go and pursue maybe medicine or like I love cars. And I thought about maybe going and being like an engineer and trying to like design cars or something. So what I'm trying to say is once I finished passing that test, I finally picked up a hobby that I've been wanting to do forever. And I bought an old BMW, kind of 200,000 mile BMW for $2,000. And most weekends or most free time, I'm now hanging out in my garage, tinkering with that thing, trying to slowly turn it into a race car. And that's been like one of my best mental wellness activities over the past, 8 months or so. And it's not traditional, I don't think you'll see that in any of our DSM textbooks or anything. But it's had such a great impact on me because like instead of, bumming around on the couch or something, watching Netflix or whatever, just being a bum, it's so much more gratifying to put new parts in, and like, it's a bitch and I'm screaming at my I don't know what I'm doing, or watch all these YouTube videos. I go to O'Reilly's like 50 times in a row. But it's been extremely gratifying and helpful for me. So I'm glad that you guys kind of have that approach of, just find whatever works for you, but you got to at least start looking for it. Because I think a
Yeah.
lot of our classmates just assume that medical school is supposed to suck. And so they live with being depressed and don't do anything about it. And
Well,
it makes me, go ahead.
and medical school does suck.
Yeah.
Um, let's just be clear. Medical school does suck, but it doesn't suck. It sucks because it's hard. But I think when you see that, you're like, yeah, man, you're living your dream. Like, I would much rather do med school all over again than to be in a career I don't want to be in.
Yeah.
Um, but you're right. Find something that works for you and just do it. But I think that's also a much more easier said than done type of deal, because some people don't even know what they like,
Mm-hmm.
and I've seen that before. You know,
Yeah.
People are like, I don't know what my hobbies are. I don't know what I like, and it's not easy. I think for people like me and you, who kind of discovered what our hobbies are, it's easy.
Mm-hmm.
For like you like you said, man, you go down to your garage and you're like, all right, what next? For me, I
Yeah.
literally just pick a deck. I just pick a deck of cards off my wall, and I'm like, all right, I'm just gonna mess around a little bit. But for other people, I think it's difficult because they don't know what it is that makes them happy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think that's what the challenge is. One of the challenges of kind of dealing with mental health.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, so kind of last question here. I know, or I think I read on your Instagram one time. Are you like chair of social media of the student government
I
or
am.
something?
I'm the national public relations and web representative. So
Okay.
I deal with all things social media. I deal with our image. I deal with our branding. Um, that's me. Yeah.
Okay. And I think one as now students and then eventually doctors, it's like this weird new challenge that, previous generations of doctors haven't had to face is
Hmm.
how do we have a social media presence? And it's like, can we be friends with our patients one day, or like follow each other's social media feeds? And then, like we were kind of talking about earlier, like portraying medical school in the wrong light, making it look like this perfect sexy image where, you have these
Right.
perfect form-fitting figs every day on. And yeah, there's a lot of BS with that. So what do you advise people on how to carry themselves on a social media platform?
You know what? It's a difficult question. Um, but I think you need to be unapologetically yourself. Um, but you also have to understand that everyone is watching. In this day and age of social media, everybody is watching. Um,
And every one of us is a role model because, like we've said it, so many people want to go to medical school.
yeah, and that's funny that you say that, because I was like, I never considered myself a role model. I just wanted to spread positive vibes, give advice, but people tell you that, like, hey, I look up to you, and you're like, why? Because
Mm,
you kind of like, you're like, why? Because for me, I'm a regular Joe Schmo. I'm just in mid school, and I'm just sharing my story with the world. But I actually have been, recognized at conferences. I've also been misrecognized. I've been called other Instagram people, but
oh, that's very
people have
funny.
but people have come up to me and said, "Hey, are you Ed from Instagram?" And I'm like, "Yes."
Ah,
It's kind
there's
of
a lot
weird.
of eds. Yeah.
It's weird, but but I would say, yeah, be unapologetically yourself, speak your mind, but also be aware that people are watching. And it sounds contradictory, but you know, I think there are certain things you should say and certain things you shouldn't say. But another thing I will mention is, like, my Instagram is my only Instagram. my ed.med page is my only Instagram page because I know a lot of my friends have their private pages, their private accounts, but
Hmm.
they also have their public, medical
Yeah.
Instagram. But for me, I was like, you know what? I'm not a med student sometimes, and then Edward Ing other times. I am both all the time.
Hmm.
So I'm just gonna share what I feel like. You see my posts, they range from anything from humor, because I just need to let loose, to advice, to inspiration. So in terms of having a social media presence, I think you just got to be yourself and find your brand. And I'm saying this knowing full well that I have many friends who have, tens of thousands of followers, and they're living their lives and they're kind of showing you what their lives are like and they're being themselves. And I think that's kind of the key, is to be yourself and speak honestly.
Yeah, and I,
Yeah.
I would agree with that. And I think it boils down to kind of just like what's really the motive though here. Because I feel,
Yeah.
and what frustrates me a lot with some of the accounts that I see of medical students or residents, it almost seems like they're just posting things because their motive is to try to gain followers. And I don't know if that motive is to then maybe turn those followers into some kind of like passive income and like, hey, we're both, at least I'm graduating with hundreds of thousands of dollars of student debt. I don't, your school I'm sure is expensive too. And like if that's your motive, it's like, man, like there's other ways to make money out there. And like, so, I think I sometimes should be doing my Instagram differently and as a way to help kind of grow this podcast. But I actually find mentally I am way better if I don't go on Instagram very much. If I post very sparingly, not as, like I've literally had to put limits on my phone of like 20 minutes a day because I find it is like so easy to be addicted to that stupid shit. Of constantly checking it, watching sports videos or whatever. And it's I've really learned to kind of like I need to take a step away, and I don't know
Mm,
exactly how I'm going to try to handle this in my future. Because for me, it's very strange to be in this place where someone and like a residency program director or whoever is going to be able to type my name and see my podcast and find out that I have bipolar disorder in 2 seconds. So I try to combat that as I put it in my first paragraph of my personal statement too. But it's very weird, and we're gonna have to figure out how to best navigate these waters. Well, hey man, that I've taken about an hour of your time now. Any last words of advice about or thoughts on mental health, or this has been a great conversation. We'll have to do this again sometime.
yeah, man. First of all, thank you for having me. I guess what I would like to tell your listeners is we have a motto at COSGP, and it's okay not to be okay. And I think the sooner that people realize that it's okay not to be okay, the better we'll have it in terms of combating mental health, and mental health issues. Um, I think we lose a lot of potentially great physicians every year. We lose a lot of great physicians every year too.
Yeah,
Um,
isn't it like
that,
400 physicians or something? No, is it that high?
uh,
I don't know.
yeah,
It's
we
bad.
have a Save 400 campaign, but proportionally, physicians kill themselves more than any other occupation.
Yeah.
Um, I think we are finally getting into a culture where it's okay to talk about your feelings and to be in your feelings. Um, we you know Physicians of past have been in cultures where it's like taboo to talk about your mental health. And I'm from an Asian culture, and in the Asian culture, mental health is also very taboo. I'm very lucky that my parents aren't like that, but I know for a fact that there's a lot of Asian families that will never see a psychiatrist because what's their statement? I'm not crazy.
Yeah.
I don't need this. Not realizing that anxiety, depression, panic disorder, all this and beyond, bipolar, all this, schizophrenia. It's all under the same, not the same umbrella, but it's under psychiatry and mental health. And people don't realize that. But I think with social media, like you said, we're moving in a really good direction of how to deal with mental health. I know Dr. Manipod.
Yes, I look up to her
Yeah,
very much.
and I love her as well. And she's kind of one of those people who are at the forefront of dealing with mental health. But there are other people who aren't psychiatrists who are also in that area, you know. And so I think it's kind of nice that, yeah, social media can be a very toxic place, but I think it can be also a very healing place when you hear people who have issues similar to yours.
Yeah.
So bottom line is, if you don't feel okay, number one, that's all right. It happens. But number two, don't be afraid to reach out.
Yeah.
I think people are too, like, a lot of people don't reach out, and that's the biggest kind of downfall of a lot of people.
Well, and I
And so,
sometimes think those are the posts that are missing from social media. And I'm guilty of this. When I'm not feeling great, I don't post typically. But, I feel like that's such a better light and shows such a better real experience of what medical school is like. Like I just got home from a 7 to 6 shift. And I have my COMAT shelf exam, in a few days. I really need to study. This sucks. I'm exhausted, but here we go. And I think those posts need to be present more than, the other ones shot in the mirror with my Lithman Cardio 5 stethoscope. Like it's just, that I don't want to see that crap. I want to see people struggling and helping each other out kind of thing.
and you know what though? It, I've posted about suicide. I've posted about my mental health. I'm very unapologetically me when I post about that stuff because for me at least, it's cathartic. It kind of is therapeutic because it, it's getting it off my chest, but knowing that my post might speak to somebody gives me it's a lot of therapeutic vibes, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
Because like you said, med school isn't all sunshine and rainbows, man. It sucks
Yeah.
a lot of the times. And a lot of people don't post about that stuff, but people are starting to. And I think we're moving in the right direction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's
Well, there you
I
go.
think that's a good way to fucking end this great convo, man. Well, hey, dude, so good luck preparing for step 2. I hope that we're kind of in the same vicinity, maybe on this interview path. I'd love to grab a beer with you. That'd be awesome, man.
Absolutely, man.
And the DO world is a small world, so I'm sure we'll cross paths eventually. But yeah, I'll get you back on the podcast again, man.
Thank you so much, man. Have a good one, buddy.
Yeah, dude, this was fun. All right, have a good night.